Welcome back to the Perfectly Preserved podcast. I'm Anna here with my co host Jenny. We're so excited to be with you today because we have a very special episode all about herbs in the garden and why you should really be growing herbs, why you should be dehydrating or freezing. But first of all, thank you so much for those of you that have downloaded the podcast, who are sharing it online. We absolutely love that and appreciate it.
Okay, so before we hit record, we were talking about herbs and just in general how easy they are to preserve and how useful they are, and frankly, pretty easy they are. Those of you out there may not know that Anna is all a master gardener. I am a novice gardener. I was raised with a family garden, but I've never had a big garden myself, so I'm learning and learning from Anna. But I was telling Anna that the way that I use herb on the regular, as the kids say, at least once a week, I use herbs in my baking, which seems so strange. Or as Anna said, she thought that was a little bit unusual, maybe. And I guess you guys could let us know if this is how you use herbs or not. But I'm a big fan of my bread machine. I think they are so helpful in helping me make more homemade baked things. And very often, probably once a week, I'll get the ingredients in the bread machine. I'll press start, let it get started mixing. I'll go out with one pair of scissors and snip off some thyme, rosemary, and like right now, my chives are going crazy. So I'll grab some chives, walk back in, give them a rinse, and then just stand over the bread machine while it's mixing and just snip off little itty bitty snips of those herbs or whatever ones I can grab right then into the dough. And it makes the bread dough so flavorful. It makes it so that whenever I end up putting on it, if I'm making like a calzone or like I'll make pizzas, like 2 pizzas for my family, or sometimes I do bread twists. Like if we're going, I did this a lot during like football season. Like if we were going to go Sunday football at a friend, I would just make breadsticks and then it would just be the bread basically. It just makes it so flavorful. It just really makes it a lot better and super easy. So I don't know if everyone else is just putting their herbs sauce like a normal person, but I use it in my baking a lot.
And I have never done that. I don't know. I guess when I was doing sourdough, I would do what's called inclusions and I would
Mm-hmm.
add things like nuts or seeds or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And sometimes I would do rosemary, but like I never think about putting it in my pizza dough. And that's so smart, especially fresh herbs, because it imparts so much great flavor.
Yeah. I honestly was surprised. I was like, dang, that made that a lot better. And it's better than or more flavorful than if I sprinkled it on before I baked it. It's more flavorful than, I mean, it's good in the sauce.
Mm,
The sauce is good, but the sauce is not all throughout, right? The tomato sauce is just on the surface. So I feel like in terms of just making the whole
yeah.
of the bread better, the herb inclusion is very good. So it's just something I think that our listeners could add to their list of things to maybe test out or try. Do you want to start by talking about growing herbs? I like you could add a lot of impart some wisdom to our listeners for how easy herbs can be in a pot. They can be in just a little nook and cranny in your garden. They could be just the very first thing you ever grow. Tell us a little bit about growing, Anna.
Sure. And I do have to make a disclaimer that even though I did do the Master Gardener course, I am still learning every single year how to grow better. And one of the things that I love growing as far as herbs go are the ones that are perennials. That means they come back year after year. You don't really have to babysit them. They're pretty unfussy. And I'll talk about some of my favorite varieties, but there is a difference in herbs between their growing conditions, what they
Mm-hmm.
like. That could be lavender loving that Mediterranean hot, dry summer versus maybe some of your tender crops like basil. Basil for me is notoriously finicky. I live here in the Intermountain West, which means it's a high desert. And if I am not watering my basil quite a bit, it turns dry and not as tender. So, really look at the back of that tag when you're purchasing herbs and figure out what the growing conditions are needed for herbs. Most herbs do drain soil,
Yeah.
though. So, keep that in mind. Don't plant them in a clay-rich soil. I actually recommend people either have garden boxes or grow bags or pots
Mhm.
for their herbs, just because the drainage is so good in a pot.
Yeah. It's
So that's some of the growing conditions. Yeah. What do you like to grow, Jenny? Jenny is in Northern California.
so it's think of it more not California like the beach, but California more like eastern or southern to eastern Oregon. But I probably get a little bit more rain than Anna does, not by a lot. So in one garden bed that I have, and the bed is shallow. It is I bet 8 inches deep, not deep at all. I have rosemary, loving chives. They're next door to each other, and with uh rosemary, chive, all are doing gangbusters, raining potting soil, and the potting soil was expensive. That's an expense. But the soil I have here, I'm in mining
Hmm.
country, so a lot of our soils are really poor after the dredging process has gone through, and there's not a good way to remedy that. So planter beds are go to
Oh,
for my
interesting.
area. Yeah, some of them are. So it's just been more successful, even if it's pretty small. They are thriving, and I wasn't sure how much deer pressure I would have with no fence. We do have a new dog, a young dog who's really doing a job in terms of keeping the deer away. But I planted the chives in among the other things that I thought the deer would like, so as to hopefully sort of deter. And I actually have some strawberries just
Ah,
in and among all that, which doesn't really go thematically, and that's not an herb. But all those are doing great together. And I also planted some pretty sage. So I feel like it looks very nice. It smells nice.
oh, nice.
And I put all this right next to
Mm.
Chicken Run, actually. Um, I mean, is it really a whole lot of pests? Maybe, but it's certainly not going to hurt because pests notoriously don't like those many herbs, and those specific ones they supposedly don't like. So far that has just been super successful for me. But
Yeah.
tell us more about the tender herbs. I feel like when we talk about herbs, I think of in every grocery store in America right now, you can buy like a little tiny pot with a super tall basil in it. And I feel like those are just destined.
Yes.
It's like you're going to go home and you're going to snip up those leaves, and then you're never going to be able to get that sucker to grow. Tell us why, Anna.
I know. Not only are the leaves perfect for photosynthesis, but once you start snipping off a ton of those, unless they're in like direct sun and they're getting decent nutrient from the soil, they just don't stand a chance. But I have seen people repot those grocery store basil plants, and in new potting soil, they can get pretty happy. And as long as you're not too brutal like with your pruning, they can last for a long time. And they can even branch off as you start cutting away at it. But I would recommend that you cut it right above like a set of leaf nodes.
Mhm.
Don't cut when there's just nothing left on that stem because it won't grow back. It does need some leaves for some photosynthesis if you plan on keeping it in your kitchen and growing it for a while.
Basil needs a lot more water than the more Mediterranean-y. The rosemary, the thyme, the chives, those need a lot less water. They are very happy when you do water them, but they are pretty dry. Whereas basil is like mint levels of water, right, Anna? I've felt like it just needs almost twice as much water, twice as
Yeah.
often. It's a little bit harder.
I am growing some new to me herbs this year, including lemon verbena, which I cannot recommend enough for your peach jam.
Ooh.
Throw some lemon verbena chopped leaves in there and you will die. It tastes so good.
Ah.
And then I'm also growing some fenugreek, some lemon basil, obviously regular basil I started from seed, and some lavender. So those are the new herbs that I'm growing this year, and I'm interested to see how it will do.
That all sounds so amazing. I also grow dill. I feel like dill is fun. I feel like my kids are always so delighted by dill because it's different looking and tall, and the seeds are fun, and it just is a magical
Yeah.
looking plant. They're a little bit older now. They're like
Yeah.
preteen. My kids are teens and early teens and preteen. But when they were little, they really loved dill plants, and those are I feel like they grew very easily and super useful in canning, like a big head of dill in your jar of pickles or dilly beans. So much wow, so much flavor.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, very pretty, very fun. Even if you know it,
Gorgeous.
you can just snip it in your bouquet. It's just very structural, I guess. So pretty. But easy to preserve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think dill is one of those magical plants that has almost like a feather-like quality
Mm.
where it blows in the breeze. It's fennel also has that. Yeah,
I've
I
never
love
grown
those.
fennel, but it has that same kind of structure.
Yeah, it's super
Oh,
similar.
oh, fun. Hopefully you've been convinced that growing herbs is easy. You can do them in pots. You can do them in planter beds. You can grow them right at your doorstep, wherever you've got a little spot. And just you look at drainage and then how much water and how much sun they need. Um, but you can find an herb that's probably well suited for a spot that you have. And you can even do like a little windowsill thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with a little window. The basil gets lumped in with other herbs and it likes a much wetter situation. It's a little bit not finicky, but it's just a little trickier than some of the other ones. I feel like rosemary is, and you'd have to work hard to kill a rosemary plant. They are very hard, I feel like. And basil's just not that way. Um, but beyond them, let's talk about how to preserve them because they can be rock stars in your kitchen and so much more. Tell us why a person would go to the trouble of dehydrating herbs when they can just buy them from the store, Anna.
There's one really main reason for me, and that is that the grocery store herbs that you are getting are probably, they can be up to 4 years old. And the longer that a dried herb sits, the loss
Mhm.
in aromatic smell and flavor happens. And so for me, drying herbs at home allows me to have very fresh tasting herbs. And for me, that's just key. If you love food, you want to get it when it's either at peak harvest or in the best way of preserving. There's a few different ways we can preserve herbs, Jenny. What is
Yes.
your favorite way?
I mean, there's so many ways. Freezing, I feel like, is just since we're in the crowd of canning, everybody wants to can everything. Uh, and I think that this episode might be affects your philosophy because dehydrating is such a powerhouse and freezing is such a powerhouse. So some herbs are best frozen,
Mhm.
and those specifically would be basil and dill. You can blanch them in boiling water for 45 seconds before patting them dry and then freezing them. You also can mix them with oil or butter condiments like a pesto. Um, I made a pesto out of carrot tops, and it sounds so weird and so this is probably the most California thing I've ever said. Carrot tops, pumpkin seeds, good parm, and basil. The best pesto. In that
Mm.
jar, I made several pint jars of it and kept it in the fridge, and it lasted. It took me 2 years to eat all of it, but it was so good, so flavorful, so delicious.
Wow.
If you just keep it good and cold and use a clean utensil when you spoon out of it, right? It's gonna last a very long time. And that was what was amazing is that it didn't taste any different from the first month to the 12th. It was still very, very good. So it's good to know which herb you want to freeze and which you want to dehydrate. Um, Talk to us about the dehydrator, Anna.
All right, the dehydrator is one of my favorite tools. I actually am drying some herbs right now. I have lovage. We didn't really talk about this yet, but lovage is an amazing perennial herb that a friend gave me a start from,
Uh-huh.
probably, I want to say 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And each year I watch it come up and I just don't really do anything with it. And I thought, you know what? This is ridiculous. So I decided to cut some of the stems, and it's very similar looking to celery and parsley. So it almost looks like a cross between the two.
Hmm.
And the flavor is very similar to a spicy celery parsley. And I don't mean spicy like hot, spicy
Yeah.
like arugula is spicy.
Yeah.
And it's just fantastic. So I'm
Huh.
drying it. I'm going to chop it a little bit in my food processor, and then you can add it to soups and stews.
Uh,
It's very popular in England, Eastern Europe. I was looking at recipes, and there were some from Romania and Bulgaria
huh.
and Germany. And the great thing about lovage is that I have never watered that plant, and it's already 3 feet tall.
It's a,
Never. I've never watered that
it
thing.
has
And we get really hot summers,
thrived on
dry.
neglect for anything. It's like a trusty barn cat doesn't need you for anything.
Exactly. Probably like, thanks for pruning me. That's really great. Yeah, I'm dehydrating that right now.
Amazing. I've never even thought of growing that. That's amazing. I'm clearly need to add that. You know what we didn't say for our listeners? If you are wondering quietly to yourself, what's the difference between an annual and a perennial? Perennials, you buy once or plant them once, and then they just keep coming back year after year. And an annual is something that will live one season.
Mhm.
They'll be great, and then that's it. And it's just a decision I guess you make based on what your needs are or what you want to do. I personally am addicted to perennials in terms of just I only want to plant perennials because much work
Easy.
ever again. I just want to plant this and then enjoy how it comes back bigger and better every year.
Yeah.
So, but some people love the ritual of the feed store in the spring. I know my like really loved like, oh, it's time to go to the feed store and get her. She would get her flowers for the year that she was going to plant, and she would get her driveway barrels. Some people love that,
Oh,
and it's sweet and it's great. And if that's what you want to do it, but just
yeah.
know that every dollar and every hour, it's either going to be an annual or a perennial, and perennials come back. You don't have to do that again. And that also means that wherever you plant that, think like you're probably not going to move it. This is where it's going to live. Some of them are easy to transplant, but I mean, it's going back in that spot next year, so you want to give it plenty of space. And I think through this where it's going to live, it's pretty permanent. You know, it's like the home you buy, not the home you rent. And we're going to put it forever. So just keep that in
Right.
mind. So
Yeah.
dehydrating, tell us more.
Herbs are very tender, and you want to try and keep as much of those aromatic properties as possible. So you're going to dehydrate this at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I do it low and slow, and it probably takes, I'm going to check it at like 12 hours just to see what it's feeling like. Dehydrated herbs are going to crumble under your touch when they're ready. You don't want any moisture content really at all when you're dehydrating. So make sure that those leaves or stems or whatever you're dehydrating are crumbling under your touch. That's really important. And then you're going to store in airtight containers on a cool, dry place away from sunlight. And you can crush or grind them before you use them, or you can leave them whole.
I have a good friend down the road who gave to me a mason jar with dried mint and dried chamomile mixed together as such a nice tea mix for the wintertime. And I couldn't believe how much better all that smelled than, you know, a tea bag is. The herbs in there are not right, not even close. It smelled so good. I didn't have to use very much.
Sure.
It was really sweet. It was a very effective thing to dry. So like mint and chamomile, that's not exotic. That's not difficult to grow. Those are pretty easy things to, and it was really, really nice because you don't have those fresh in the wintertime usually, or here we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would say as a seed saver is that I like my annuals to go to seed in the fall. And then when they go to seed, you can actually either harvest those seeds or just sprinkle them back in the ground. And in the spring, they will come up.
Right.
And you just repeat that cycle over, and it just keeps coming up. I don't know if you've ever planted dill, but dill is a very, I don't want to say promiscuous seedy plant, but I find it's so fertile. If you have a dill going to seed in your garden, you're going to get dill coming back up the next spring because it's so prolific.
It's spreading its seed hither and yon. Have you ever heard any person say that? I've heard people say that, and it makes me laugh every time I've heard it. But dill is spreading its seed hither and yon.
The other thing I would love to share with our listeners is that it's a perfect time to dehydrate your chives, your green onions, your garlic scapes. For me, in one of my garden beds, I forgot about some garlic that didn't get separated out. So this spring, there's just a bunch of garlic shoots coming up. And I'm going to take those, cut the tops off, and dehydrate those. And then I'll make a powder with fresh garlic and onion tops and green chives and things like that. And I think that's a really great way to, I don't know, have your own special blend of herbs and spices that came straight from you. I absolutely love that story of your friend that gave you a very personalized gift of mint and chamomile.
It was super sweet, and it was actually very bittersweet because at the time she was moving. It's kind of a long story, but she was like, I'm leaving. Here's my parting gift." I was like, "Man, I should be giving you the parting gift," but it was just very sweet, and like it
Aw.
wasn't a ton of work, and it wasn't super difficult, but it was very good and very easy to enjoy. Wintertime when we don't have those herbs available, it was very nice. I also think having
Mhm.
herbs available makes you a better cook. It makes your cooking better. And if you have them
Absolutely.
and you bothered to dry them, you're more likely to use them, which I think it's just like a very simple preservation step that we might like not think of or not necessarily be like. If you're tuning into this podcast, you're probably excited to learn about canning or like learn pressure canning or freeze dry, ready for step 2.0. Don't sleep on the dehydration because it can be super, super valuable and easy. And like you have your dehydrator running, how many hours is it running
Yeah,
for?
we'll see. But I usually check it after 12 hours.
Yeah, see, so like anytime in the 11 to 14-hour range, you can check on it. It's just like so much more forgiving, I feel like. So an herb have preserved it with great success, dehydrating it, or hops. Hops are a vine that is
Oh,
the plant hop are used in beer. They actually have a very strong preservative quality. And if you are a person who likes IPA, stands for India Pale Ale, and an IPA has a lot of hop added to it because it was preserved from Western Europe for the long journey to India. So they just have a lot of hop
mm,
flavor. That's what that herb is probably most famous for. But it's also, I believe, a cousin of the marijuana plant,
yeah.
which only I mentioned because it has a very gentle sedative, like sleepy time sedative quality. So it is very bitter, but you
Oh,
can
interesting.
dehydrate those. They look like a little pine cone. You've probably seen them on a label of any IPA. You could just look
Mhm.
at an illustration, right? They look like a leafy green pine cone, but they're small. You can dehydrate those so easily. And it's the little yellow kind of, I don't know if it's actually pollen, but it's a little yellow substance up at the top of each pine cone leaf. But that gets very dry and they're very pretty dried, very aromatic. And that is actually a super simple dehydration herb. When you grow them, their vines are very raspy, like a raspberry. So if you needed something to climb a wall or climb some sort of trellis or something, but you didn't want to attract or produce like a fruit that's going to be in your lawn or attract a bear, they're really a neat vine
Mm.
that you don't necessarily see a whole lot that you could dehydrate as well.
And what do you dehydrate it for the purpose of beer making or like why would you dehydrate it?
So if I were just a person, just not necessarily a home brewer, I would dehydrate a small amount for adding to a tea, like one little of those pine cones with, uh, let's say, chamomile tea and a sugar would be a very good sleepy time herbal blend. You don't want to do too much because it is a fairly bitter herb, but it does have a distinct sleepy time feel to it. It's definitely helps you get ready for bed. And I'm sure
Oh,
I'm sure there's cooking applications that I am not familiar with, but I just happened to know about hops. My parents owned a brewery when I was
hmm.
very young, so I happened to have hops growing at my home when I was a kid, and
Oh, interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, but they are a very useful plant in though we don't produce like a fruit that's going to give you something else, another project, but they're have big broad leaves. They're easy climbers.
Sure.
They're neat. So that's just a possibility for your aspirations.
What else can you use
Oh,
instead of a dehydrator?
oh yeah. So if you don't have a you can use a cookie sheet in your oven at the lowest temperature setting that for most ovens, that's 200 degrees or less. You also can prop open the door of your oven to get a little bit cooler, like with a wooden spoon. You can air dry herbs. Hops you can string on them like you would either chilies or like popcorn if you were stringing it for Christmas. You can dry it like that. You can air dry bundles of leafy herbs. Probably the more drier Like if they like a dry habitat, those tend well in the upside down bundles. Like sage is good like that, I think. Rosemary dry like that. Um, if you've never grown rosemary, it grows on, which is so handy for, I mean, it's just easy to hang upside down and dry. It's very simple. What other herbs do you dry just hanging upside down in a dry place, Anna?
Oh, I've done lavender. I've done, like you said, sage. I've done definitely flowers and chamomile, yarrow.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. Pretty much anything that I have an abundance of and I don't have space in my dehydrator, I just bundle and then hang.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes 2 to 3 weeks usually for everything to get really crispy and dry.
Oh, so many easy ways to dehydrate herbs, guys. Easy ones. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We referred to a girl from the University of California that just listed all the things that we covered in terms of just tips about growing. We'll link it in the show notes. Tips for growing, tips for what to dehydrate, which to preserve in the freezer, and then just general good links for growing herbs. So it was actually a article we found from the UC Master Gardeners of Santa Clara County. So that was really helpful. The Preserve podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you have been one of those wonderful souls that leave us a review, we appreciate it so much. And if you haven't, head to that purple icon or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you love this episode, share it with a friend. It's so helpful. It inspires you to plant and preserve some herbs this season.